Oi, pessoal, boa noite. Bem-vindos a mais um GitHub Presente. Esse GitHub Presente vai ser uma versão com The Best of GitHub Universe de 2020. Não é isso, Thiago?
É isso aí. Meu nome é Tiago Pascoal e sou arquiteto DevOps na equipa de Fast Track do GitHub e junto com o meu incrível confatrião vamos guiá-lo pelos nossos destaques do nosso evento anual, o GitHub Universe.
Isso aí, meu nome é Pedro Lacerda, eu sou engenheiro de soluções aqui do GitHub, estou muito animado para estar aqui hoje com vocês, e junto com o Thiago e os nossos GitHub Stars, o William Justin e o Júlio Arruda, a gente vai passar pelas principais funcionalidades e vai falar um pouquinho do GitHub Universe para vocês.
O GitHub Universe 2020 foi o maior e melhor universo de todos. Foram 3 dias de conteúdos, mais de 60 horas no total. Tivemos DJs, perguntas e respostas, apresentações, painéis e conversas com ótimos palestrantes.
Então a gente quer garantir que todo mundo aproveita bem o show. Então a gente separou aí os nossos melhores momentos do Universe 2020, que a gente compilou nesse Best Of. Né? E na próxima hora, mais ou menos, aí, 1 hora e 20, a gente vai ter um destaque, vai apresentar para vocês um destaque de mais de 1 dúzia de sessões que a gente teve, focado aí na parte da comunidade, o que apresentou de novo. Né? Foi muito conteúdo bom, foi difícil para a gente definir o que a gente vai apresentar, mas a gente trouxe aqui o que a gente achou mais interessante para vocês hoje.
Mas não se preocupem, todas as sessões estão online para que vocês possam assistir sob demanda, assim que queiram. Portanto, têm acesso às 60 horas no total. Basta acessar em githubuniverse.com, clicar mais na barra de menu. A partir daí podem assistir a cada segundo do Universo 2020 ao seu próprio ritmo.
Então é isso aí. Voltando para o conteúdo de hoje, né? A gente vai começar o nosso Best Of exatamente de onde o Universo começou, que é de uma apresentação do nosso CEO, do Ned Friedman. Depois a gente vai apresentar aqui um destaque de novas funcionalidades, novas coisas que o GitHub trouxe. A gente vai ouvir sobre DevOps, vai ouvir sobre segurança, o que todo mundo tem que estar pensando quando a gente pensa aí no futuro do desenvolvimento do software, independente da sua posição, né? A gente vai ver o GitHub, um relatório que a gente faz todo ano, que é o State of Octoverse, que é a nossa revisão anual de tendências, insights e atividades do GitHub. E a gente vai fechar aí depois com um trio de organizações parceiras nossas, falando sobre como eles usam o GitHub para resolver problemas do dia a dia que eles têm.
Okay. Sem mais demoras, vamos então começar com os nossos vídeos. O Universe 2020 começou com um discurso e apresentação do nosso CEO, o Ned Friedman. Ele apresentou o GitHub Enterprise Server 3.0 e algumas funcionalidades novas e incríveis que vocês podem usar desde o Universe. GitHub Discussions, Code Spaces, aplicações móveis e muito mais.
Good morning. Welcome to GitHub Universe. Today, we are going to walk you through how we use GitHub at GitHub, and along the way, show you some of the really cool new features we've been building. Let's check it out. I start my morning with the GitHub Mobile App. I check out my notifications, and I catch up with my favorite communities. GitHub Discussions makes this so easy. We announced it a few months ago as a great place for Q&A and open-ended conversations, and today we're announcing that every open source community can try GitHub Discussions with our new public beta. Just head to your repo settings and turn it on right now. We've learned a ton from the communities that have already been using Discussions, and we've added some great new features like customizable categories and native support in our mobile apps. It's awesome.
With GitHub Mobile, not only do I get push notifications for things like comments, but I can keep working on any of my repositories no matter where I am. Let's jump to Naya's pull request and take a look. With UI changes like this, sometimes it's hard to know if everything's working just by looking at the diff. Sometimes I actually need to run the app to see the changes. This calls for a code space. GitHub Codespaces gives me a complete dev environment right in my browser, even on an iPad. It's like an infinite dev box configured in code, just how you need it. And since Codespaces is built on top of Visual Studio Code, it gives us a fully featured editor right in my browser, complete with built-in terminal access and shell access.
Tens of millions of developers use GitHub, but so do hundreds of thousands of companies, including some of the biggest in the world. For those users, we've been hard at work adding all the new features you saw today to GitHub Enterprise Server, so you get all the power of the best teams in the world running on your company's network. That includes GitHub Actions, packages, code scanning, and support for the native GitHub mobile apps. All of this is available in a major new release we call GitHub Enterprise Server 3.0. This is the biggest release we've done of GitHub Enterprise Server in years.
E aí, o que é que acharam?
Para mim é fantástico. Tiveram muitas coisas legais que o GitHub está trazendo, como as actions, que particularmente para mim é a maior mudança de todas que a gente tem aí no GitHub. Acho que o Júlio também mexe muito com GitHub Actions, né, Júlio? Então,
sim.
É uma das coisas assim, mais incríveis que tem. E ainda tem muita coisa mais que teve no Universe mostrando, que ele falando sobre o Enterprise 3.0. Então, mais segurança, mais features. Na minha opinião, foi muito legal.
Bom, só esse Keynote por si só já foi animal, né? O jeito que ele foi apresentado pra gente já ficou muito bacana. E a parte do Enterprise que você estava falando também aí, eu acho que veio num momento bacana, né? Tem uma infinidade de empresas. Eu passei por um projeto até recente, que o pessoal estava querendo acabar saindo do GitHub Enterprise justamente pela falta das actions que estavam vindo. E agora com isso daí foi um pontapé a mais lá para continuarmos usando isso daí e também para os outros verem que o GitHub não é só comunidade, né? As empresas também estão sendo abraçadas aí para dentro do GitHub.
Certo.
Sim.
Não é só sobre o tópico das novas funcionalidades, o Universo tem várias sessões sobre elas. Não é só sobre as funcionalidades em si, mas também como é que as organizações podem usá-las de forma mais eficaz. Por exemplo, o nosso próximo destaque é de Maya Ross, a diretora de produtos no GitHub. Maya mostrou como o Enterprise Server 3.0 dá aos administradores novos capacidades em codificação, automação, segurança e planejamento para acelerar o desenvolvimento.
So myself and my colleagues spend a lot of time talking to administrators, people like Keith, who run DevOps tooling for their companies. And we know that you've got a lot to do. And it's pretty hard sometimes. You have to secure all your software and your applications across the supply chain. You need to help your teams to automate workflows so they can focus on what they do best. You need to try and build a culture of collaboration, virtual teams, communities of practice to help swarm around new ideas and products that you want to launch. And of course, you need to make sure that all of the tools you're responsible for are available, secure, and governed. At GitHub, we have one underlying philosophy for how we help companies, big and small, to achieve goals like these. And that is to empower developers with an integrated platform. And in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about how you can use some of the capabilities in GitHub Enterprise to achieve goals like that. But first of all, what are those capabilities? So those capabilities sit across 4 core pillars: coding, automation, security, and planning. And all of those sit on our kind of secure enterprise foundation that allows administrators to secure your code and access to it and to govern it through policies. It also enables you to build a community and crucially tap into the power of that github.com community. And I'm extremely pleased to say that all of these capabilities are now coming to Enterprise Server, to our thousands of customers running GitHub Enterprise in their own environments. Our Enterprise Server includes GitHub Actions, packages, advanced security code scanning and secret scanning, and also comes with support for our iOS and Android apps. As I mentioned, one of the big things that we've been working on this year is to add Git events to the Enterprise Cloud audit log, and I'm just going to show you briefly how that works. So first of all, many of our customers like to query the audit log through the API. We can do that here. As a quick example, here just querying only Git events from my enterprise, and you can see it's bringing up Git fetch events, Git clone, and Git push events from across the enterprise. I can query both Git and GitHub events at the same time if you want to, or just one or the other. You can also export those Git events just here and your GitHub events. Next year, we'll be adding those Git events to this UI as well. Just want to touch briefly on some branch protection rules and how we're extending them. You might have seen a little bit of this in the keynote if you managed to watch it. So here I have a couple of branch protection rules set up, which means that any code changes need to be reviewed, first of all, by a third party, and then by my code owners, normally often a security or expert team, before they're merged in. GitHub has also recently expanded the same concept to environment protection rules. So if you're using GitHub Actions for your CI/CD flows, you can put in checks on environment deployments. Just have a quick look at that. Here I have another repo. It's set up with these environments, and my production environment has a environment protection rule, again saying that I need to have a couple of reviewers. Jump over to Actions. We can see a pull request that has been merged in and then deployed through my environments. And as per my rule, it has been approved by me. This is one of the biggest things that we've shipped in the last few months. And in this vein, we're now announcing a new change to how we release Enterprise Server. So from Enterprise Server 3.0, we will start every feature release with a release candidate build. That's a build that's gone through full GitHub testing, but one that we're putting out there for you to pick up, test, try, bash around, and give us feedback on. And when we're happy based on your feedback that it is a very stable release, we'll GA it. I think this is going to make a big difference to the overall reliability of the product, and I'm excited for this change. So GitHub has really built the community standard for automation with GitHub Actions. I'm sure you will have seen this before, but Actions is the #1 CI tool on github.com, and it's achieved that status in just a year after launching. And we now have 6,000 actions on the marketplace, which I just think is an amazing testament to how easy it is for developers to build actions. Now, our security capabilities have grown massively over the last year. Advanced Security offers both code scanning and secret scanning, which are automated security scanning tools. And in addition to that, our dependency alerts, automated security fixes, and the advisory database are making sure that both private and open source repos are staying secure.
Então, isso, pessoal, acho que a gente viu ali uma visão geral, né, de todas as funcionalidades que pensaram. A gente vai quebrar mais um pouquinho em cada uma delas mais para frente. Mas eu queria saber aí para você, Júlio, o que te chamou a atenção em tudo que a Maia mostrou para a gente ali? Pega uma e comenta um pouquinho bem por alto sobre ela para a gente.
A parte de Actions ter vindo ali para o Enterprise, para mim, foi bem legal, principalmente essa parte dos environments, que eu acho que estava faltando ali dentro das Actions mesmo, toda a possibilidade desses ambientes que a gente vai ter. E também a parte de segurança, que eu acho que é muito importante, principalmente para o público Enterprise também.
E você, qual que te chamou mais atenção dessas todas aí?
Definitivamente eu achei a parte de segurança uma parte muito legal. A gente ainda vai ver mais sobre o CodeQL, que é a tecnologia que o GitHub utiliza para essa parte de segurança, mas para quem realmente trabalha, né, nesse foco de Enterprise, o GitHub está trazendo muita coisa que vai prevenir desde brechas de segurança gravíssimas até mesmo outros problemas de dependências e problemas no próprio deploy. Então, foi realmente uma coisa muito legal que o GitHub está trazendo e é extremamente automatizado. Você não precisa fazer nada para ter esses ganhos, né? Então, isso para mim é genial.
E é bom que a gente vai pegar um pouquinho mais de cada um deles mais para frente aí também, né, nos próximos vídeos. Mas agora um outro recurso também que recebeu bastante atenção e que é muito interessante foi o Code Spaces, né, que basicamente é a gente pensar em quanto tempo todo mundo gasta aí setando um ambiente local, funciona na minha máquina, mas não funciona na hora que você manda isso para frente. Eu acho que agora a gente vai trazer uma apresentação aqui da Bailey Brooks e do Matthew Isabel para a gente poder ver um pouquinho como o que são os code spaces, como configurar e quais os benefícios que eles trazem para a gente, né? Então, vamos lá para a próxima sessão.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey. I'm here with Matthew, and we're both product managers on GitHub Codespaces. Earlier this year, we announced GitHub Codespaces at Satellite, and the excitement from the community was overwhelming, to say the least. It was amazing just how excited the community was to be able to have a cloud dev environment, so you can go from a repo on github.com to a running codespace within seconds, without any setup or configuration. GitHub Codespaces are instant cloud developer environments. Codespaces provide you with a machine you can access through a browser or your IDE, where you can write, run, debug, test, commit, and push your code from, which leads us to an important question. Why should anyone care? There's a lot of hardware out there. You're watching this on a machine that you can potentially write code on. So what is so special about Codespaces? The goal for most of us is to write great code that ships value to our customers, the open source community, ourselves, whoever that audience is. The goal is not to spend your time doing local dev environment management, although it can consume a lot of your time and it may not be your job. Your company might have a person or a team where this is such a problem that it's become their job. And hopefully you're not managing Python 2.7 anymore that's been end of life. But it's just an example to say, let's write great code and be able to write it fast. Writing great code should be about doing just that, and not the periphery of machine management that surrounds it.
The way we get to Codespaces is right from this page. We can go to the code button, and right inside this dropdown, we can open this project inside of a code space. So let's go ahead and do that and talk about what's happening and what that offers us for this project. So I've created this code space. I was using it pretty recently, and I'm going to jump in and just resume an existing code space. So you'll see we connect here, and we land in what feels and really is VS Code, and it's VS Code in the browser. And for me personally, this feels a lot like home. And the reason is because I use the GitHub Dark theme, and this is using the GitHub Dark theme. But if I had another theme, I could have that set up and synced across my code spaces as well. You can see I have my custom bash prompt here, and my dot files are synced over automatically. So I really have everything that makes this feel like I'm developing locally. You'll even see there are some extensions that aren't standard here, that don't come automatically out of the box. So I'm also able to bring in the extensions that I'm used to, that I like to work with, and use them all inside of the browser for this code space. I have an editor. I have an editor in the cloud. It is VS Code, but it's not just an editor, right? It's a full cloud developer environment. So what that means is we can go to the terminal here, and we can go ahead and run our app. And you'll see our app ran. It says it's running on localhost 3000. And you'll see I got this toast that says my service is running on port 3000 and it's available. So let's go ahead and open this in the browser. So what's going to happen here is we're going to connect to a forwarded port from this code space, and it's going to load our app. So you'll see I have this app called Haikus for Mona, and we have some of those octocats that Martin was just talking about. And I have little haikus that we've written about some of these octocats. And this is really cool. I'm running a Node app. It has a Postgres database backing it. It's not super complex, but I'm able to get the full app running with a container for my web service and with a container for my database. And I can interact with it. I can do everything I would do to build this app locally. And that port is just forwarded on securely to me. But we also, again, have VS Code here. So we can do more than just run our app. We can debug our app. So let's go ahead and run this app with our debugger attached. So you'll see we have the app. Our port 3000 is forwarded again. And what we're going to do here is let's just set a breakpoint. So I'm going to create a little bit more space here. And as I said, this is a pretty basic Node Express app. And we have some endpoints that are defined here. And we have this endpoint for the heart experience. So I can go ahead and heart something and like it, and the counter goes up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. And we can jump right back into our code or our live running app. I'm going to go ahead and click this heart button. And you'll see up here, we hit our breakpoint. So we can jump over here. We can actually look at the stack. We can look at the request that came in here. We can step through this function. This is super powerful. I'm able to, run a full debugger of my app in the browser. But I also like to spend a lot of my time using VS Code locally. And I want to go from VS Code and connect to my code space. And I can do just that. So let's go to VS Code. And I'm actually going to go to the Remote Explorer. And I've installed the Codespaces extension. And what I'm able to do from here is I can connect to this code space from VS Code. So what's going to happen here is this is going to take a second. It's going to set up our connection. And then we're going to have our entire code space in just the state that it was, right? Because we're connected to that remote machine. So you can see my changes are here. And I can go ahead, and if we want to make our commits from here, updates for live demo, can go ahead and make our changes. Everything looks good. And let's go ahead and push them. So I'm going to go ahead and push. And now our changes are back on our repo. So if I go back to the web, we can see this full end-to-end. I am going to use the command line with this nifty little trick to go back to the repo. And you'll see updates for live demo. Here's our commit. You'll see that it kicked off GitHub Actions. So it's now running my tests. And we did all of this from the code space.
Fantástico. Aquilo que eu mais gosto no CodeSpace é que consigo aceder aos meus ambientes em qualquer sítio, mesmo que não tenha a minha máquina, desde que eu tenha acesso à minha chave YubiKey para aceder ao GitHub de maneira segura. Júlio, na tua perspectiva, o que é que isto vai trazer para melhorar a tua vida?
Cara, a possibilidade de eu trabalhar de qualquer lugar é fantástica, né? Se eu quiser trabalhar do meu iPad, eu consigo, né? Então, isso aqui, até pela mobilidade, pela praticidade de eu subir um ambiente, eu não tenho nem palavras para descrever o quanto isso aqui vai me ajudar.
Wilson.
Eu até tenho usado bastante isso.
William, numa perspectiva de comunidade e não numa perspectiva pessoal, o que é que achas que isto vai trazer para a comunidade em geral no teu trabalho?
Então, como eu sou um instrutor, trabalho muito com essa parte de educação, eu vejo que tem muitos alunos que têm dificuldades para poder inicializar um projeto porque não tem um ambiente correto para fazer ou não sabe instalar as coisas realmente. E aí, com CodeSpaces, eu posso dar um link para o aluno, ele vai abrir e já vai estar tudo funcionando para ele, sem ele ter as dificuldades e os problemas aí de ter que instalar Node, Rails. O interessante é que funciona como a gente viu no vídeo, até com banco de dados. Então, para quem não entende de Postgre, por exemplo, vai funcionar também. Então, para mim, é uma das grandes features que está vindo aí com o GitHub.
Obrigado. O Enterprise Server 3.0 vai trazer grandes melhorias para os desenvolvedores e vai lhes permitir escrever grande código e simplificarem o seu fluxo de trabalho utilizando aquelas ferramentas que eles mais adoram. Para irmos um bocadinho mais além, vamos ver alguns destaques da sessão do Chris Patterson sobre Continuous Delivery com GitHub Actions. Vocês verão porque é que com Actions, que agora é o número 1 em Continuous Integrations no GitHub, vocês saberão como usar as Actions para proteger e acompanhar os seus ambientes.
GitHub Actions is grown massively. Right now, We run about 75 million jobs. The slide says 73, but when I looked this morning, it's about 75 million different jobs a month across a wide variety of workloads. CI is probably the most common thing that people absolutely automate. But the amazing growth has really come, I think, due to the community. And if we look across sort of all of the different CIs that happen on GitHub, we definitely believe Actions is by far the number one. We seem to do the most, at least from what we can see. We actually see closer to 10,000 different actions used across different organizations. And we think that's pretty incredible because that means people are both using the community, but also taking advantage of using actions within their own organizations. What we implemented was protected environments. And the idea here is we wanted to prevent unauthorized deployments. And in order to think about how that might work with GitHub Actions, in fact, you've seen this on the roadmap. If you looked at our public roadmap, we have something called manual approvals. So this is configured on your repo settings outside of the workflow. And when you try to deploy to a given environment, if a set of reviewers is required, the system will pause that job before it ever goes to a runner and send out a series of notifications and require a person in this list or somebody in a team to come and say it's okay for that job to continue to deploy to that environment. We heard from a lot of people that they want to be able to track what is currently in a particular environment, whether that environment is production or if that environment is a staging or whatever. Starting to build this new activity log here is part of our goal to really move in that direction. And this is kind of where this kind of 4-ish new capabilities comes in, because this deployments view actually exists in GitHub today. It just isn't very commonly used because it's a little bit hard to make it show up. And so we took some of the existing platform in GitHub and integrated directly into Actions to make it easy for you to get this list of deployments. We wanted to give you a much better way to visually track how your workflows are progressing. As you have these more complex workflows, particularly ones that do sort of pipeline style deployments to different environments, or maybe have rich matrices or other concepts, having the ability to see where those go and sort of track their progress at this very visual level, we think improves just the overall usability of Actions, the usability of more complex workflows, and the ability to debug potential issues. And we've also started to do some other work to integrate in other places. I think you saw in the keynote, Nat had a really neat little vignette at the end where he launched dark mode, and you saw sort of a sneak preview of some work we're doing with the mobile app. We've also done a lot of work with the team who works on the Slack integration to integrate those there, and you'll start to see these roll out again. And we think that as we use all of these endpoints for GitHub, we can really help drive that culture of rapid deployment and unblocking your team from where you are exactly how you need to. We think that all those things together really do add up to the ability to do very, very rich continuous delivery workflows with GitHub Actions. We have a lot of plans to enhance this capability in the future. For example, the protection rules for environments, we really see that as a great potential point for integration.
Bom, Júlio, acho que você foi uma das pessoas aí que comentou muito a respeito do que Actions foi uma das coisas que mais te surpreendeu nisso, né? Disso tudo que o Chris falou, o que você acha que vai ser mais útil na sua vida do dia a dia de trabalho? Assim?
A Actions em si já estava legal, né? Tudo aquilo que ela podia fazer para a gente, mas eu tô com o microfone aberto. Mas estava faltando para a gente essa parte justamente que ele mostrou ali de aprovações, de ambientes, de segredos por ambientes, e isso tudo para mim está fazendo a diferença para a gente poder começar a usar isso realmente no dia a dia ali para poder fazer o deploy das nossas aplicações. Então, acho que essa parte dos environments em si veio aí para agregar bastante, que foi me surpreendeu nesse último evento aí.
Para você também, William, você acha que essa parte vai ajudar as pessoas a conseguirem entender melhor como é um workflow de trabalho, como que ele está orquestrado ali embaixo também?
Eu acho que, assim, uma dificuldade que a gente tem, muitas vezes, é de ter os ambientes bem organizados. E a possibilidade que o GitHub já deu de permitir essas chaves separadas por ambiente de um jeito bem prático ali pelo painel, já ajuda muito. E outra coisa que eu também gostei muito e que foi mostrar o fluxo mesmo, porque na primeira versão do GitHub Actions, há muito tempo atrás, tinha o fluxo, aí ele acabou sendo tirado e agora voltou a ter o fluxo e até melhor. E eu sou uma pessoa muito gráfica, então eu gosto de ver as caixinhas completando e ver ali o que está acontecendo. Então, para mim, isso foi muito legal de poder ver em que passo que eu tô.
Eu acho que, assim, quando a gente fala de GitHub Actions, normalmente a gente pensa, né, em falar de CI e CD, então sempre pensa nessa área direto. Mas é engraçado não, assim, é interessante a gente olhar para Actions como uma ferramenta de automatizar o seu fluxo de trabalho. Então, acho que esse é o ponto que a gente vai tocar agora, nessa apresentação que vem agora do Brian Douglas, que, como a gente conhece aqui, o Bidog, ele é porta-voz dos desenvolvedores aqui na equipe do GitHub, e ele foi o co-anfitrião de um dos canais, o canal focado na parte dos desenvolvedores, e ele vai mostrar um pouquinho para a gente como que ele usa Actions para automatizar uma série de recursos, e ele utilizou ali para automatizar o Lighthouse num projetinho dele. Então, acho que agora a gente vai ver como o Actions funciona além do CI/CD, né?
I think what a lot of people kind of think of GitHub Actions as is CI. And I even saw this in Twitter, hashtag GitHub Universe. Check out the Twitter feed there. Someone brought up with the continuous delivery features, like what does that mean for continuous integration? I think they're sort of conflating everything into one, which is fine because that's what GitHub Actions is. And if you zoom back a bit, it's all about workflow automation, automating yourself to get back to the code. And I bring this up because when Jason Warner stood on stage a couple years ago at GitHub Universe, he presented Actions as a feature for developers to get back to what they want to do. So if you're constantly doing all this tedious checking in, like hitting up Slack, telling your coworkers to review your PRs, like you could automate all that stuff. And the beauty of this is that GitHub Actions basically gets you back to what you want to do, which is write code. One other thing that I also added too in my workflow is adding Lighthouse. Now, Jake Jarvis actually, he has this Lighthouse action, and the one thing that I do for my deployments is I deploy to Netlify. And the reason why I chose this is that every time there's a Netlify deploy preview on my project, which is open source, I actually get an entire preview directly linked inside of my pull request, which is beautiful because I've been using this other action I built called Logify, which also brings my previews into the deployment logs. First and foremost, I don't have an example about this in CD yet because it just launched yesterday. But what I like about this is that I get Lighthouse scores every time I open a PR. So if I have a PR from someone else, because this is an open source project, anybody else in the community, I actually can find out if I have like a degradation of my Lighthouse score or performance or accessibility right there in line with the PR. And when I talk about sort of identifying repetitive tasks, every time I open up a pull request, I want to make sure accessibility and performance do not go down. I want them to stay consistent or get better. So I bring that up because with the Lighthouse action, I can actually embed those Lighthouse scores within my action logs. So that way, not only in my action logs, but also in the PR comments. And it's all powered from this one action, which is beautiful. And like, you're probably thinking, Lighthouse is already embedded in Chrome. Like you can just open up the Chrome tab and like just know what you're doing and check that before you merge the PR. And the thing is, I won't do that. I won't do that for anybody's PRs. I want this to be automated and get myself back to writing my own code and not have to do that for every time a PR is open up on my project. So I bring this up. Shout out to the artifacts too as well, like actually having the report in line inside of my logs as well. It's just a beautiful experience.
Grande exemplo de uma ação feita pela comunidade que melhorou a vida do Brian Douglas sem qualquer esforço. William, tu por acaso já desenvolveste alguma ação e o que é que achaste do processo em si?
Eu já fiz algumas actions, a maioria delas em privado ainda, uma delas eu estou para quase lançar público. Para mim, ajudou muito, porque facilitou demais alguns dos meus fluxos. Igual o Bidogo mostrou aí do Lighthouse, eu também trabalho muito com front-end, então eu criei algumas actions para análise de performance também, e que me ajudavam muito para não correr o risco de baixar performance ou inserir dependências que não seriam tão interessantes para o projeto. Então, a action já pegava isso a cada pull request, e aí eu não precisava ficar no review falando, por favor, remova isso. A própria action já tinha um botzinho que avisava, remova. E aí eu não precisava fazer nada. Isso é incrível para mim.
Júlio, numa ótica de utilizador e não apenas de desenvolvedor, o que é que achaste da comunidade de actions? E é fácil encontrar actions para incluir nos teus projetos, ou é algo que tens que fazer tu próprio porque não encontras à tua disponibilidade coisas já disponíveis feitas pela comunidade?
Olha, eu achei muito bacana o quanto de coisas que a gente já tem feito pela comunidade. Eu confesso que até o momento eu ainda não precisei partir para desenvolver algo para solucionar algum problema meu. A maioria dos problemas que eu tive, todos já tinham, alguém da comunidade já tinha desenvolvido. E o bacana é que tudo isso é repositório público no GitHub, né? Se eu quiser entender o que está acontecendo, eu posso até olhar ali. Então, tem sido bem legal essa experiência com as actions de comunidade também.
É o que eu mais gosto. Como sou preguiçoso, há sempre alguém que já fez algo para resolver os meus problemas.
Sim. A única que eu fiz ali foi para testar um pouco alguma coisa, mas já tinha algo similar que eu acabei usando a que já existia também.
Perfeito. Numa ótica também de recursos que são úteis para a comunidade e para as equipas de desenvolvimento em geral, é o GitHub Actions. Entrou recentemente em beta público e vamos ver um vídeo da Ana Batri, da diretora de engenharia de software do GitHub, em que nos vai mostrar como é que se pode configurar, customizar, usar e até moderar utilizando actions para discussões públicas ou privadas.
De discussions, né?
Discussions, perdão.
I'm really excited about talking about building your community with GitHub Discussions, which as of Tuesday is available for all repos in public beta. And so thousands of you have turned it on since then. I want to quickly talk about the open source ecosystem and why GitHub Discussions exists in the first place. So this is an incredibly oversimplified cycle of what open source work looks like on GitHub. So basically, people use a feature, tool, or product, then they notice an issue, they file an issue, and that work will hopefully get prioritized, maybe worked on. Someone will open up a pull request, it'll get merged, and boom, it's slated for a new release, and it goes out into the world, and people use the new thing. So already there's something missing, and that is where the conversation lives. And that's because it usually lives over here. Outside of the cycle, products ignite ideas and facilitate conversations, and that conversation ends up in chat applications, forums, social news, and basically sometimes GitHub issues. We want to keep Q&A and conversations separate from GitHub issues, but we also don't want those to be completely detached either. Their relationship is important. So you can think of GitHub Discussions as the living room of your open source community. If you haven't enabled discussions yet, I'm going to show you how now. So to start, you're going to want to go to your repos settings page, and then you can go on that default page, scroll down to the features section, and you'll see a discussions checkbox waiting for you. And it looks like this. So you can click on set up discussions to get started. And this is going to take you to a pre-made template that we've set up for you. Click on pin discussion, and there you have it on your index page, your first discussion. Now, if you have issues that should be discussions, you can cover those individually, convert them or in bulk. So if you wanted to do it in bulk, you can go here to the label section. Here we selected the question label. Obviously, probably the best one for that is the Q&A category. And there you go. All you have to do is click that button, and you're going to convert those from your issues over to your discussions. And you can see that over on your discussions page. Every repository comes with a default set of 4 categories: general, ideas, Q&A, and show and tell. But these can be modified. I think the most important thing about categories is that you get to set the tone here to help the community know what to expect and where to go. Let's get directly into the mechanics of marking an answer. So anyone with Triage Plus access or the author can do this. And this is kind of what it looks like. When you find an answer to a question, you can click on the checkbox and a great box will appear and you can say who marked the answer, and it'll be recorded so you can even see who marked it right underneath. Now we have all the tools that we need to manage existing discussions. Let's talk really briefly about some enhancements we have to improve the community's interactions. And first things first, you can see right here, there's a leaderboard on the right-hand side and it shows people with the most answered discussions. Finally, I wanted to briefly talk to you about what you can do with triager, write, maintainer, and admin permissions. And as far as discussions go, people with write, maintain, admin access can basically do the same thing with 2 exceptions. So people with maintain and admin access can enable discussions altogether from the settings page. And also they're the only ones who can create and edit categories, but otherwise they have the same permissions. And that's basically it. That's what you have. So we talked about getting started, categories, new discussions, marking answers, how you can use the information on the site to provide recognition, and how to moderate and keep the community healthy. So here's an example here where Snowpack has used a pin discussion as their change log. And so it's kind of pinned at the top. You can see that Fred's got some spot on GIFs here. And what I love is that each comment is a new version and it details, and it allows people to easily reply with thoughts or words of thank or encouragement.
Bom, acho que para começar aqui, ninguém é melhor do que o William, né, William, para falar de como você tem usado as discussions no seu dia a dia e também na comunidade, de umas comunidades que você gerencia no Front-End BR.
Eu amo Discussions. A minha primeira experiência com Discussions foi com o repositório do Next.js, da Vercel. Lá eles foram mesmo. Exatamente, eles foram os primeiros a começar a experimentar e tudo. Eu olhei e falei, nossa, que incrível. Isso é exatamente o que o fórum da Front-End BR faz, só que a gente usava issues. Então, eu acabei entrando em contato com a Brooke mesmo, que é uma das Project Managers do Discussions, e pedi para ela para que liberasse para a gente no Front-End Brasil, e a gente está usando. E, nossa, ficou muito mais organizado, bem melhor. Eu vejo uma enorme vantagem que a gente tem agora de ter o Discussions, até por ter a partezinha de, por exemplo, cada vez que alguém responde, ganha um pontinho, deixa o negócio até um pouco mais gamificado e as pessoas querem participar mais. Então, eu achei bem bacana e eu até faço um convite para o pessoal participar mais lá do fórum da Front-End BR. Eu vou botar o link no nosso chat, porque eu quero ver mais gente movimentando lá.
Massa. Eu acho que para a gente poder manter a nossa apresentação no tempo, vamos ir pulando para a próxima sessão, né? Então, a gente falou um pouco aqui, né, sobre as novas funcionalidades que a gente está apresentando, o que ela representa não só para quem é cliente Enterprise, mas também para a comunidade. Agora a gente vai passar para falar um pouquinho de segurança, né, que acho que a gente vive num mundo aí que ela é super essencial e super importante para todo mundo. E nessa próxima sessão agora, quem vai falar com a gente é a CEO, a diretora de operações do GitHub, a Erika Bradshaw. Ela vai falar um pouquinho sobre algumas estatísticas, sobre números de segurança que a gente tem conseguido acompanhar e como que a comunidade open source tem trabalhado em cima desses itens aqui. Beleza? Vamos lá para o vídeo da Erika.
GitHub is where the world builds software. Over 50 million developers trust GitHub to collaborate, test, build, and deploy code, including over 70% of the Fortune 50. In fact, in the last year, over 60 million new repos were added and over 1.9 billion contributions were made. Those are some seriously big numbers. The stability and resilience of our global platform is critical to providing developers with a platform they can count on. GitHub Enterprise is built on the same principles as GitHub.com, and as a result, benefits from the years we've spent optimizing the platform to be trusted, reliable, and resilient. From day one, we've focused on building great products and experiences for the developers who spend their days or their nights on GitHub. From pull requests to code spaces, actions to CodeQL, and everything in between, our vision is to build the home for all developers, whether they're working on a fun side project or building mission-critical software for Fortune 500. Across all open source repositories, repos that use actions on pull requests see PRs merge 1.2 times faster, and the number of merged PRs increased by 1.3x. That's 34% more pull requests merged. This is huge in terms of improving developer velocity.
Júlio, qual é a tua perspectiva? O que é que nós precisamos de segurança, mas como é que nós podemos fazê-lo sem perder velocidade de desenvolvimento?
Cara, as integrações com CodeQL da Action, que a gente até vai falar, acho que mais depois, né? Ele vai ajudar bastante a todo esse nosso processo. Pode ser melhor. A parte de case scanning também que está vindo aí dentro da parte de segurança, eu acho que vão ajudar muito a esse todo o nosso ecossistema ali para agilizar o nosso dia a dia, o nosso processo com a parte de análise de segurança do GitHub aqui também.
A Érica mencionou algumas funcionalidades-chave de segurança, incluindo o CodeQL, que o Júlio também já referiu, mas vamos falar mais sobre isso em breve. Mas por hora vamos escutar a Sasha Rosenbaum, que é uma gerente de produtos no GitHub, e a sessão dela no Universo foi sobre o commit de segredos. Quem é que nunca, por engano, já fez o commit de uma password ou de uma credencial por engano? Acontece. E o GitHub foi lá para detectar exatamente isso, e tem havido alguns casos em que pessoas que, por engano, fazem commit da sua chave da AWS ou da Azure ou outra coisa qualquer, e há alguém que vai apanhar essa chave para fazer mining de Bitcoin, e a certa altura a pessoa aparece com uma conta astronómica e nem se apercebe porquê, porque alguém lhe roubou a credencial que ele fez commit por engano. Vamos ver então agora um vídeo como é que o GitHub integra a segurança e o scan de credenciais para que estes erros não aconteçam, ou que quando acontecerem não fiquem tão caros e sejam detectados imediatamente.
We're going to talk about the state of security today. So my favorite analogy for this is imagine that you just built your most amazing favorite mansion and you have just installed all the most expensive furniture and all the most expensive appliances, and you just forgot to install doors. So this is sort of how we treat security today. We just kind of say, okay, we have time for this. We're just going to first deliver on all of the features, and then we're going to basically add some locks on the doors and some doors to our mansion, right? Because features is what's important. If we look at the chart of how we deliver code, then we actually see that the more lines of code we write, the more security threats we actually introduce. And so we don't learn from our mistakes. We just basically continue committing bugs and moving on and just like committing secrets, committing security vulnerabilities into our main code base. And despite that, as developers, we often treat it this way. So we just basically say, okay, it works in dev, so it's a security problem now, right? So I have developed my code, I committed all my stuff, and now I can just get and ship it to security, and then security is going to fix it all for me. But we know that that's not possible because there's so many more developers than security professionals. Basically, we have about 45 million estimated developers and only 70,000 estimated security researchers in the world. So today, I'm going to basically talk about how GitHub can help you fix your security issues for you. So we have a large number of features in GitHub Advanced Security that can help you integrate security into your developer experience. So it's not extraneous to what you do, but rather it's shifted all the way left and integrated into your development lifecycle. So basically, we help you secure multiple parts of your code. So we help you secure the supply chain, the code, the development lifecycle, and of course, your platform. But today, I'm going to talk specifically about the code part. So we can see that almost 50% of all the breaches in the world actually include stolen credentials. And yet we're pretty bad about not committing these credentials or these secrets into source control repositories. And this is where secret scanning actually comes in. So we have different different oriented features for public and private repos. So I'm going to start with public repos. For public repos, we actually have secret scanning for a number of years already, and we are doing it at massive scale. We're scanning about 150 million pushes a week. So basically every push into a public repo basically gets scanned by GitHub to identify secrets. And many people don't know that it's happening because it's transparent to you. If you as a user check in your code and that code actually contains a secret, so we actually run different regular expressions from known secret scanning partners to identify if something you committed actually matches one of these secrets. So basically, we then send the matches to a partner verify endpoint, and then the partner can verify if it's a real secret or if it's not. And then depending on what the partner wants to do with this, sometimes they revoke the secret, and sometimes they also email the user, right? So basically, we have this process in which completely transparent to the user in some cases, your secret actually gets revoked by the partner, and so your secret is no longer in the repository. So if you say committed an AWS secret into your repository, then instead of someone stealing your credentials, we're actually probably going to revoke it for you.
Vou começar agora a pergunta para o Júlio de novo. Assim, Júlio, poderia ter sido salvo alguma vez com secret scanning? E o que você acha que traz de benefício aí para os projetos, open source, também para as empresas que precisam que podem tirar benefício disso? Né?
Olha, não vou dizer que eu diretamente passei por essa, mas teve um companheiro de trabalho uma vez que subiu um código com uma chave da AWS e a conta do cliente foi para as cucuia. Se já tivéssemos isso naquela época, isso tudo teria sido evitado.
Seu William, já passou por alguma coisa dessa?
Na real, eu passo por algo parecido quase que toda semana. Agora já tem melhorado um pouco, mas o que acontece? Vários alunos acabam não sabendo que não pode subir essas variáveis de ambiente que são secretas, né? E o que mais acontece é aluno subindo, eu olho no repositório e falo, olha, tira logo, porque tá com senha, aquilo ali não pode subir. Então, isso acontece demais com quem não entende, né? Para quem está começando. Então, eu acho que é legal para empresas grandes, para evitar esse problema aí de conta de AWS, de ir para as cucuias, mas também ajuda para quem está começando, que são os que acabam cometendo a maior parte desses erros e aí acabam ficando traumatizados, né? Achando que não pode mais fazer nada porque, meu Deus, tem uma conta para pagar. Então, é muito útil mesmo.
Não só quem é júnior, a gente já viu muito sênior fazendo isso também, né? Erro humano, cara. Erro humano vai acontecer. Né?
Erro humano sempre tem.
Sempre tem aquele dia que você trabalhou até mais tarde e não notou alguma coisa.
Uhum. Pois é. Então, acho que é isso, né? A gente vai falar agora sobre o CodeQL, que é um pouquinho do que a Erika mencionou num dos vídeos anteriores dela. Então, agora a gente vai entender um pouco como o CodeQL funciona e falar um pouquinho também sobre o programa de recompensas de bugs do GitHub. Vamos lá para o próximo vídeo.
So, GitHub code scanning. Earlier this year, we announced it, and code scanning does exactly what it says on the tin. It scans your code for security vulnerabilities. And any alerts we find in pull requests are automatically flagged up to you so that you can fix them before you merge the code changes into your main branch. That particular code patterns could be, for example, a server-side template injection vulnerability. When you run CodeQL, whether that's in code scanning or on your own local machine, the first thing it will do is it extracts all of the source code that you have into a special relational database. In a way, it's similar to a MySQL or a Postgres database. It's a very special one, though, a special purpose-built read-only one. We call it a CodeQL database. And just like with MySQL and with Postgres, you can run queries against that database. And in fact, a CodeQL query looks a bit like a SQL query, but it's a lot more powerful. I'll show you one in the live demo that I've got. Now, a CodeQL query is a way to sort of interrogate and explore your source code. A very simple query might, for example, look for a variable called password that you then write to a plain text log file. More advanced security analysis, more advanced queries do very intricate flow analysis. They track where user-controlled data enters your application. They track it through your application, through function calls and data structures, to a location where it might be used in an unsafe way. And the SSTI analysis does exactly that. It tracks untrusted user data that eventually ends up in a template. Now, in a way, every query captures the security knowledge of a security researcher. And by codifying that knowledge, we can apply it at a massive scale. So, for example, we run CodeQL against hundreds of thousands of repositories, and every single query result that we get is an alert in code scanning.
William, o que é que achas da importância de um produto que faça scanning automático, varredura de problemas de segurança que o nosso código tenha, para as pessoas que não são especialistas em segurança, que acaba por ser 99,9% se calhar por cento dos desenvolvedores?
Então, eu não sou especialista em segurança, muito pelo contrário, eu estou incluso no grupo de 99,99% que não sabe tanto de segurança. Então, qualquer ajuda para mim, dizendo, olha, isso aí é vulnerável, isso aí tem algum problema, para mim já vai ser fantástico, porque vai me ajudar muito a evitar problemas. Então, eu acho que, como você falou, é um grupo muito grande de pessoas que realmente não trabalham com segurança. Então, qualquer ajuda já é uma grande ajuda. Então, na minha opinião, esse tipo de coisa é muito importante e, às vezes, a gente deixa de lado, até pelo nosso desconhecimento, só que tendo alguém ali, né, nos apontando essa falha, já faz com que a gente enxergue melhor e corrija e não tenha tantos problemas com a segurança, né?
Júlio, tendo em conta que o code scanning é gratuito para projetos open source ou para repositórios públicos, já tiveste uma experiência em ligar o code scanning e foi uma experiência dura ou foi uma coisa simples de fazer?
Eu já liguei o code scanning para testar mesmo em um projeto. Tinha um repositório ali, meu até que estava parado há algum tempo, que eu queria ver mesmo um repositório antigo para ver o que tinha de problema. Para ligar foi muito tranquilo. E olha, o tanto de coisa que ele pegou de coisa velha minha, não tenho o que dizer.
É uma questão comum, é exatamente as empresas que pensam sempre na segurança como um último recurso e deixam tudo para o fim em vez de começar uma coisa que sem pensar logo de início. Na próxima sessão, vamos ver sobre a importância de integrar a segurança desde o início do processo. O Keith Hawley, gerente sénior de experiência de aplicativos numa empresa alemã chamada Thermo Fisher Scientific, explica porque é que as companhias não pensam em segurança como recurso e porque é que não se pode implementar a segurança no fim e algo tem que ser sempre logo feito no início na cadeia de desenvolvimento das ferramentas. Vídeo.
We're going to be going through a few different ideas in this concept in terms of why companies might not think of security as a feature, of course, what they do think of as a feature first, and then going into what happens when they don't. But also, of course, some of the good things that can come from thinking of security like a feature, going ahead and then how you can implement that within your tool chain or your process, some further learning, and we'll take it from there. So let's go ahead and dive right in. What makes something a feature, right? That's something that is often discussed in concerning the project management or product management team, the dev teams. They always say, well, that's not really a feature. Security is not a feature. And that's because, of course, features are things that customers ask you for, right? They're the things that people want to see, the things that people will complain about if they don't have it in your application, and so therefore they'll tell you about it. Then, of course, there's resources in terms of people, time, or money. Those are things that get allocated to features. Whatever you're allocating your people, your money, and your time to, those are the features you're working on, whether you're calling them a feature or not. And then features, well, generally speaking, if you build it, you're going to make sure that it's regularly tested. You're going to make sure that it works the way that you want it to, and you're going to make sure that it continues to get enhanced over time. Generally speaking, you're not going to take a feature out unless, of course, it's just really not used, or it's so totally broken that it's not worth continuing and working on. But otherwise, you're going to make that thing better. Those are the features that your company is investing in. So why isn't security considered a feature? And this is kind of an interesting topic because one of the things that I'll often ask dev teams after they've done some security review of their applications is I'll say, do you have a banking app on your phone? Now, that doesn't always translate depending on where you are in the world. Some cash-heavy cultures don't really use banking applications, might do e-commerce, but I'll ask a dev, are you using some sort of financial transaction application on your phone? And the answer is almost universally yes. Well, one of the questions that you should be asking is, would you use it if it had the vulnerabilities that your application has? And that's when you know security is a feature, because it's not something that people were asking you for, but it was something that you and the people using your applications are expecting. In a lot of ways, I like to say this is kind of like the faucet that you go to or the sink that you may go to. And when you turn that left knob, you expect the water to be hot. That's universally true. You didn't have to ask anyone for it, and you didn't have to tell the plumber to install it that way. It's just the way that operates. And so in a lot of ways, that's the way that people think of security today, is it's one of those utilities that you just expect it to be there and expect it to work as intended. There are benefits to treating security as a feature. A good example of that is attack complexity increases. One of the things that I like to think about here is, why are phishing attacks still so prevalent? Because people fall for them, first of all, and because the more complex attacks are really expensive. We can look at the zero-day market when it comes to things like iOS or Android vulnerabilities that are out there today, where you've had 0 days to apply a patch or implement security. And quite frankly, those costs are going up. And that's a good thing, because what that ends up meaning is that the attacker ends up being a very small subset of the world's landscape. It ends up being state actors as opposed to cheeky kids on the internet, for an example. And so that way your application will be a little bit more robust, and quite frankly, you're outrunning a majority of the bears. Of course, it also differentiates your project or your product. If you think about Apple, for example, they're almost universally known for a lot of the security and privacy implementations that they've put in place. We can also look at examples within the software development landscape, such as React versus AngularJS. Back in the day, AngularJS, the original version of it, had a sandbox, and that sandbox had a lot of escapes, and it led to a lot of vulnerabilities, such as remote code execution or even full remote reverse shell. I've taught a couple trainings that have shown exactly how this works, and thankfully, Google has addressed that with later versions of Angular, such as by removing the sandbox in the original AngularJS because people were using it wrong. And in this way, if we think of security as a feature from the get-go, we can actually write on secure frameworks and languages like Rust to eliminate a vast majority of the vulnerabilities that enter our landscape. And of course, once you go ahead and invest in security as a feature, it allows you to save time and money. It's that return on investment, that compounding interest that allows you to actually go ahead and focus on other investments and experimentation so that you can grab more market share and, of course, differentiate your product and then pay down those other technical debts that you might be encountering. And then, of course, in terms of some tools that you can use, I like to say with static analysis, GitHub's advanced security toolset is phenomenal. Their acquisition of SEML is light years ahead of other products in the space. And I say that from being a code security engineer at Veracode in a past life. It is one of those tools that can really make a difference in your code base, and I strongly encourage any open source project to check that out. Dependency checking, again, making sure that you check the ingredients as well as of the static analysis recipe. Dependabot, really great tool if you're on the GitHub platform, which I would think that you probably are if you're watching this. And then, of course, OWASP's dependency check tool, if you need another thing to go ahead and look into the environment and make sure that things are working appropriately and that the libraries you're using are fresh and secure.
Júlio, eu acho que eu vou pegar essa pergunta mais para você. Assim. Você já trabalhou em algum projeto que olhava para a segurança como uma feature das funcionalidades, do que tinha que ser entregue? Se sim, o que teve, o que você acha que teve de benefício? Se não, o que você acha que poderia ter ganhado de benefício caso eles tivessem olhado para a segurança com essa perspectiva?
Eu tive não diretamente eu trabalhando, porque como o próprio William citou, ele também não é, assim como ele, eu também não sou especialista em segurança, mas eu trabalhei implementando ali o ASP/SAP em alguns projetos que o time de segurança tinha requisitado, e graças a isso no processo do pipeline ali, encontraram uma série de vulnerabilidades que o time de dev ali tinha deixado passar em diversos pontos. Então, ter essa possibilidade de você colocar segurança no seu processo tem ajudado bastante, e as integrações do GitHub com isso, por consequência, também, né? Integrações aí no pipeline com actions, outras features como o Dependabot, que eu acho que vai ser falado aí na próxima apresentação, tem muito a agregar para a gente nos projetos.
Acho que a gente vai pegar agora, igual o Júlio falou, fazer uma finalização aqui da parte de segurança, de tudo que a gente está falando de segurança, então a gente vai pegar um pouquinho mais de Dependabot, então a gente vai ter o Justin Hutchins, que é nosso gerente de produtos, né, na parte de segurança, falando um pouquinho mais sobre isso. Ele vai dar aí uma visão geral sobre o estado de segurança do software, das bibliotecas que a gente usa, e ele vai mostrar também como o Advanced Security do GitHub ajuda a proteger as dependências, os códigos e também as chaves que a gente usa. Beleza? Vamos lá para o vídeo?
Here at GitHub, we're really focused on understanding security from the developer's point of view, because empowering developers to build secure code is one of the best ways to move the needle on your security story. Now, there's a ton of great data in the State of the Octoverse report this year, but one of the things that I like to point out is how developers introduce security vulnerabilities at a relatively constant rate with every line of code that's written. And that's not me criticizing developers. I don't write the code, and I know just how hard it is. This should really underscore that writing secure software is really hard. It doesn't matter how smart your team is. It doesn't matter, how well you hire. There's a reason that MITRE has so many different CWE buckets. It's because as humans, we tend to introduce the same kinds of problems over and over again. Around 83% of applications have at least one security vulnerability in them. Organizations that adopt DevSecOps practices run security scans daily reduce their mean time to remediate security problems by around 72% versus organizations that run, just a few times a year. So that's why we at GitHub have been hard at work with a collection of security solutions that we call GitHub Advanced Security. Within GitHub Advanced Security, we've got three major product areas. The first is secure dependencies. And this is your classic software composition analysis, or SCA capabilities. They help you track the software you depend on for vulnerabilities. Considering that, as much as 90% of the code on GitHub depends on open source, vulnerabilities in your supply chain are more important than ever. The next area is secure code. And this is our set of features that handle static analysis security testing, or SAST. While SCA looks for vulnerabilities in code you depend on, SAST looks for vulnerabilities in code you wrote by analyzing that code and finding bad patterns and data flows. Finally, secure secrets. We know credential leaks are a huge problem, both for security and reliability reasons. I mean, have you ever tried to roll keys on an app where someone hard-coded credentials into the source code instead of putting them into the key vault? It's not going to be a good day. You're going to cause an outage, and everyone's going to be unhappy. So let's drill in. Dependency review is a brand new capability that we unveiled here today. You might have seen Nat speak about it earlier. This helps give code reviewers insights about the dependencies in your pull requests. That's why we've made it really easy to view results in code scanning. Super easy by integrating those alerts into pull requests and making sure that developers are only blocked when they introduce a net new vulnerability in their code. That way, when you have a lot of security debt, it's not going to come up every day. It's not going to slow you down. It's still there, and we hope you'll fix it, but it's not in your way. CodeQL is the semantic analysis engine that powers our own security analysis. Now, a lot of static analysis tools out there do things like use regular expressions or look at bytecode to try and figure out what's happening. CodeQL, we actually map all the code in your repository into a graph database. And this is special because it allows security researchers to reason over that code and develop queries that can find really complicated vulnerabilities with really high precision. By bringing all of this together in one user experience, we're making it easier than ever to get security challenges in front of developers before they're a problem for your users. And we're using that exact same infrastructure to help enterprise developers identify secrets in their private code as well. This scans the full history of your repositories, and it provides users with a native experience for triaging secrets that we find in your code. Now, as much as this is a security feature, it's also a reliability feature. We're working with everyone from big clouds like AWS, Azure, or Google, through developer tools like NPM, Twilio, HashiCorp, or Pulumi. This list is growing all the time as more and more companies work to help their users avoid security risks in the cloud.
William, de todas estas funcionalidades que foram aqui faladas sobre segurança, qual é que é a tua favorita?
Definitivamente de mostrar no pull request qual é a dependência que pode ter alguma vulnerabilidade. Principalmente porque no front-end a gente instala muita coisa e muita coisa a gente não sabe que tem dependências internas, que tem outras dependências, e aí vai ver que no finalzinho de uma das dependências tem uma vulnerabilidade. Então é muito bom já no pull request você ver que tem esse problema, assim você consegue corrigir e ninguém precisa ficar avisando no review nem nada, porque automatiza eu gosto. Então essa automatização para mim foi perfeita.
O Dependabot também é das minhas partes favoritas. Como eu sou preguiçoso, ele trabalha por mim, cria-me pull request para fazer o upgrade das minhas dependências sem eu, e eu só tenho que dizer sim, está feito. Só um lembrete, o Universo teve muito mais sessões daquelas que nós estamos aqui a falar, obviamente, e podem vê-lo a qualquer altura em githubuniverse.com, em vídeo on demand, ao seu próprio ritmo, sem que tenham que andar a dedicar algum tempo ao fim do dia, etc. Portanto, podem ver ao seu próprio ritmo e os vídeos vão estar disponíveis durante muito tempo. Vamos deixar de falar um bocadinho sobre segurança para falar um bocadinho da própria GitHub. Recentemente, como fazemos todos os anos, revelámos um relatório do State of Universe em que damos uma olhada anual sobre o que é que está acontecendo no GitHub e na comunidade de código aberto, onde detectamos padrões, etc., para ver o que é que podemos aprender como um todo. Na próxima sessão, a Nicole Fosgren, para quem não sabe, é autora do Accelerate, entre outros livros, é um livro fantástico sobre DevOps, e ela vai percorrer padrões de desenvolvimento global, como é que podemos utilizar funcionalidades como o Discussions, as Actions, o Dependabot, para ajudar empresas e as pessoas em particular em escalar o seu trabalho e a trabalharem melhor. Vídeo?
We just released the State of Octoverse report last week. It was a birthday present to myself and everyone else. We took a slightly different approach this year. So in addition to sharing with the world how GitHub has grown and changed, we also did some deep dives. We had quite a year. We have now grown to over 56 million total developers on GitHub. That's some power. When we say community, we say community. Now, we also see 72% of Fortune 50 companies are using GitHub Enterprise. Just in the last year, in the last 12 months, we see over 60 million repositories were created and 1.9 billion, with a B, contributions were added in the last year. Overall, and we see this fairly consistently across the time zones, many people are both working longer hours and getting more done. We saw contributions to open source jump initially 40% compared to last year. And then when they settle out at about 25% increase compared to the previous year. We found that once an open source repo starts using actions on their pull requests, we see an 18% faster time to merge that pull request and an increase of 30% more pull requests merged. GitHub released and announced Discussions earlier this year. So we took a look at the next.js repository and how they were using Discussions. And it was great to see and kind of exciting to see how this grew over time. And what we found is that it really helped keep this community more resilient and more sustainable. What some of our other analysis found is that some of the best ways to invite and encourage and foster newcomers to stick with the community are with issues. The challenge with issues is that can burn out maintainers. So the exciting thing is that we also found that one of the best ways to encourage newcomers is with discussions. Discussions is a way to engage, talk about what's happening, learn new norms. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with me, Nicole? This is an enterprise track. This is great because as we think about scaling our solutions and scaling throughout our enterprises, think about things like centers of excellence or communities of practice. This helps make sure that our expertise isn't siloed. This helps us spread that excellence. It's a lot like InnerSource, right? We have so many things. We have expertise, we have process. There's so many things that we can share. We found that any piece of code or any repo has a 59% chance of getting a security alert in the next year for those active repositories with supported package ecosystems. Most vulnerabilities are mistakes. Only 17% of them are explicitly malicious, things like backdoor attacks, and they result in only 0.2% of alerts in the very commonly and most used repos and most used files. 83% of these vulnerabilities are the result of mistakes. So it's important to remember anyone can make a mistake and anyone can insert a mistake into your code base. So by leveraging the power of community, that means that anyone in this community can help find these vulnerabilities and fix them for you. Another benefit of automation, repositories that automatically generated a pull request using Dependabot to fix, patch their software 1.4 times faster. So many times people ask me, what does shift left look like? If I want to be doing DevSecOps, what does that look like? This is what that looks like. We can scale what it is that we find. We can build that into our development workflow.
Acho que a gente perdeu o Júlio. Então vai contigo, William. O que você acha que é desse monte de números, assim, né? Você acha que realmente automação e garantir velocidade é o que traz qualidade para o código, no fim das contas?
Então, eu sou um cara amante por dados, então eu adoro ver as coisas que o pessoal mostra no Octoverse. Inclusive, eu gosto de ver, por exemplo, o crescimento que a gente está tendo aí na América do Sul, apesar de ainda ser um número bem pequeno. E eu concordo, sim, que quanto mais automatizado as coisas ficam, menos riscos de falha humana a gente tem. Consequentemente, a gente tem uma entrega melhor, um produto melhor. Então, eu consigo ver claramente pelos números, pelos gráficos que a gente vê no Octoverse, que cada vez que o GitHub vai trazendo algumas coisas, algumas melhorias, a gente vai tendo melhores pull requests, merges mais rápidos, tudo porque o processo de review diminui. Então, esses números são bem legais.
Massa. Eu acho que para falar um pouco dessa questão de automação, né, acho que a gente pode falar, inclusive, como que de reduzir os trabalhos manuais. A gente vai olhar agora um pouquinho para dentro de casa e falar um pouco de débito técnico e falar de como o GitHub trabalhou internamente para resolver um débito técnico gigante que a gente tinha, né, que vinha aí de anos. Então, agora a gente vai ter 3 dos nossos engenheiros, o Kit Bellinger, a KK Kumar e a Lee Selling. Eles vão falar para a gente um pouquinho de como o GitHub trabalhou e como a nossa equipe de engenharia interna trabalhou para ajudar os nossos desenvolvedores a reduzir o débito técnico. Beleza? Vamos lá com o vídeo.
So at GitHub this summer, we basically decided to have a project where we were going to pay down this technical debt with very specific outcomes in mind. We stopped most, not all feature development to really focus the engineering team on swarming on these issues. We went out to ICs to understand what are the problems that they are seeing. And of course, we looked at, what are the problems we're seeing kind of holistically across the entire system. And out of that, we came up with 3 major objectives or work streams for how we wanted to organize this effort. One was around both the outer loop, how you deploy software, but also our observability, both observability during a deploy and then just generally speaking. Another big set of work streams was around the inner loop and testing. That is, when someone is coding, they're making a build locally, they're running tests, all of those kinds of things. And then the final loop was, final work stream was specifically around reliability. What parts of the system do we need to make better and stronger so that the site is always up, always serving our customers in all cases? And so we organized across those. We had objective leads who kind of looked at each one of these 3. And then underneath them, we created virtual teams of work stream leads to tackle very specific problems.
Ultimately, we selected these as some of the work streams that the projects that we were going to work on. First, we wanted to look at how we could speed up our artifact builds. And we need some more progressive rollout stages and automation around them. And we noticed that there were recurring themes of deployment problems that we could eliminate that could take care of that need for manual intervention. So we aimed to increase that deployment success rate. And we also wanted to add some resilience in our deployment process to GitHub.com outages so that we could use GitHub.com more in our deployment process so that we could restore service faster when there is, in fact, an event. Fast forward a couple of months, and here's what we were able to accomplish. First, we added several reliability features, and thankfully we were able to do this without adding friction, right? We were able to maintain that critical queue to deploy time that we watch because we shaved time off elsewhere. We've seen our deployment frequency bump up. We're often delivering over 100 pull requests a day to GitHub.com now. The number of deployment rollbacks we have to do are fewer and fewer. It saves so many hours of deployment interruptions each week. This past month alone, it was down another 15%. Last, the time to resolve incidents when they do happen is vastly improved. And I want to mention a thing that I was super excited to see happen here. We set up a mirror of our GitHub repository so that we can build and deploy GitHub still when GitHub isn't available, the thing that we do it when it is. And another one I'm super excited about is that we're enabling merge queues for more of our repositories. We've separated out how we bundle up our pull requests, and that's separate out of the deployment process now for that repository. So all of this, along with some simpler confidence dashboards, again, that progressive rollout automation, and really, I believe, just involving so many more people to work on this experience and the outer loop and the observability, it led to this great improvement in our development happiness measurement that we take each quarter. 160%, y'all, that's big. And I don't want to neglect to call out another key observation related to this, and that is the increased unity across the engineering organizations, right? So many teams had opportunities to work together on things that we wouldn't ever get a chance to collaborate on normally. And the results of that have been so positive. But really, how do we keep this up? That's what's really important. So we have now what I like to call anti-slip measures in place. Formally here, we call it our fundamentals program. But for every improvement that we make, we set new benchmarks, we raise that bar, we monitor them each week to understand, does something need to be nudged a bit? Right, we have that additional visibility to make it a lot easier to have these conversations with product managers and engineering leaders. And it makes planning able to factor this in better and at least be more aware of what we're going to set aside if we're choosing to do other things, right? And we continue partnering and working with other teams who would really like to contribute. And this is helping us work smarter and be more effective and really get that high performing thing without having to work longer hours.
We leveraged our products, issues, actions, workflow integrations. We focused on the key metrics to identify bottlenecks and found a maintainable and a reusable solution. We ultimately built an internal tool that supports our developers and at the same time acts as a guardrail for product quality. And as for numbers, we reduced our CI time to 13 minutes, making our CI workflow 3 times faster. And then as an added bonus, we reduced our compute costs down by a fourth. This was improvement done just in one of the work streams. In the larger initiative, there was a lot more improvement, as Liz talked about. But we focused on the fundamentals of development, tracking down important metrics: deploy frequency, change failure rate, time to restore a service, and of course, what I fixed, lead time to change. Above and beyond numbers, GitHub engineering worked together to identify, prioritize, plan, swarm on the most impactful issues that matter to us. We brought together teams from different parts of the organization to work on the fundamentals. And what warms my heart the most is how we were able to focus on our engineering platform, cracking down technical debt, making engineering improvements, so that we could continue to build the best-in-class developer products for you.
Estamos quase no final do nosso Best of Universe 2020 e espero que se tenham divertido tanto como nós. Vamos ver agora só, tivemos a ver alguns destaques sobre novas funcionalidades de produtos, segurança e um pouco da própria GitHub. Mas agora vamos ouvir 3 empresas que não são o GitHub, todos de uma só vez, a falar como é que elas usam o GitHub para solucionar os seus problemas únicos. Primeiro, vamos ouvir a Alicia Carpio, a Rácio Montes da Intuit, uma organização que usou, como é que usou o Unit Sourcing para reformular práticas antigas e melhorar o seu processo de desenvolvimento. Depois verão Angie Brown e Tommy McCullough da Home Depot a explicar como é que o código aberto lhes deu agilidade com o aperfeiçoamento contínuo. E finalmente temos Tom Brown da 3M, que vai compartilhar como é que a 3M acelerou a sua inovação utilizando GitHub Actions. Vídeo.
I'm Principal Tech Evangelist at Intuit, focused on tech culture. And I'm joined by my colleague,
Rocio Montes, staff software engineer, leader in inner source and open source. I create tooling and automation to make these 2 initiatives successful.
At Intuit, we have 6 big groups across multiple continents and multiple time zones. Engineers and other technologists focus on delivering solutions declared as priorities by their groups. We have aggressive schedules to deliver features, fixes, and products to millions of customers. And speed, yes, it's a necessity. But man, to get there are some challenges. We solved it by taking inspiration from open source.
We implemented a solution that included an inner source model. Inner source takes the principles of open source into the enterprise environment. Inner source is a great tool to help break silos, encourage internal collaboration, accelerate new engineering onboarding, and identify opportunities to even contribute back to open source. You will for sure need leader support in order to provide, time for training of their engineers, time for their engineers to adopt engineer guidelines and make the technology changes. And like I mentioned before, you need to create a set of unified guidelines. Also, identify your model teams, these teams that are going to be, like I mentioned, foundational capabilities in each of the business units that you have. Conduct workshops to teach how to do inner source. We actually had workshops at each Intuit site, and every chance we got, every conference, every event, there we were, inner source, rah, rah, rah. So it's really important that you teach what inner source is.
Now, you heard about the benefits at a high level for engineers. We also wanted to let you know that many engineers told us that by allowing engineers to contribute to other repos, they were actually investing in their craft and that they were learning new skills. And in addition to the engineers, there were other stakeholders that really do benefit. The other one is our internal and external customers. And our customers definitely said that, wow, the products, not only are they delightful, but when there's a problem, you get that fix out right away. Now, for the business, Rocio did mention the business earlier. For the business, not only was there speed in delivering solutions and products to customers, but there was definitely higher engagement from our engineers or from product development teams. And we believe that and we're starting to see, some data on this, but we believe that higher engagement leads to higher retention of top tech talent.
And I am a vice president of information technology at the Home Depot. I currently have responsibility for our merchandising organization.
My name's Tony McCulley. I've been at the Home Depot for over 7 years now. I've been in the industry 20 years, which sounds crazy to me to say that now.
Our journey probably started back in 2014 on that front, which is really when we started what, internally we call our agility transformation. And that's when we kicked off really changing how we build software, going from large projects with a large number of people and a large timeline to smaller balanced teams, leveraging test-driven development, leveraging continuous deployment. Just a variety of different things changed in our work practices as we were moving down that agile journey.
We just started spending more time trying to understand treat them as users and understand their challenges, start advocating on their behalf, and then trying to provide them solutions that sort of meet their growing needs and kind of meet them where they are. So this meant approaching platforms and infrastructure and tooling with sort of the same user-centric or product-based approach mindset that we do everything else. So like our frontline associates and our customer-facing experiences. So we needed tooling that meant empowering the engineers, supporting self-organization, and tooling that helped foster more collaboration and communication. Whenever you're talking about this agile journey or this transformation, I think one of the most important things is fostering this culture of continuous learning and improvement. And when you're talking about continuous improvement, it's very difficult to do that sometimes if you don't know where you came from or where you started or where you are. And so I think, figuring out what to measure and what to improve is really important. So that's been difficult in IT. I mean, I think, almost forever, but I think it's changed a lot in the last few years. And a lot of that has to do with the work that, Nicole Forsgren and Gene Kim and the others have done over the years with the DevOps Handbook and Accelerate. So the 4 key metrics that we learned about in Accelerate has been a really liberating thing for me in my space. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we used to do that, felt good or felt like the right thing to do. I mean, for the first time in a long time, it's quantifiable, it's tangible, and it's measurable. And that's really liberating. I mean, for now, it's allowed us to treat our platforms and infrastructure and service offerings much more like a product. So we can experiment, we can make hypotheses, we can try things, and we can figure out what has a positive or a negative impact.
My name is Hung Brownson, and I'm the Chief Architect and Lab Manager at our 3M's Corporate Research and Development Group. I'd like to share with you our journey today from scientific poster sessions to GitHub Global Actions, how we've accelerated our digital innovations. By extending GitHub into Model Hub platform and using Booster as that interface with GitHub, we have drastically shortened the time it took for our modelers to onboard new models. From weeks to days. We've also tripled the number of models since launching Booster with GitHub this spring. The results have been fabulous. We've accelerated our modeling platform usage, and more importantly, we accelerated our research. GitHub has helped 3M transform in a number of different ways. By automating our 3-person folklore. We still do poster sessions today, but we've also complemented that with a GitHub ecosystem and a collaboration vehicle. We've enabled instantaneous collaboration where we couldn't do that with poster sessions. We've helped establish a culture of code reuse, which was our original objective, by the way, as we embarked on building these digital platforms. We've also helped to protect IP while accelerating our R&D innovations globally. And we've helped really to improve the way we work. And most importantly, we've brought us closer together across this diverse community of scientists and engineers. And because of this, we've accelerated our R&D and digital innovation. This is really important, and this has been an exciting part of our journey.
Eu acho que foi muito maneiro a gente conseguir ouvir falar sobre como o Hang, ouvi o Hang falar, né, sobre como a 3M usa Actions. E acho que desde a apresentação do NET até aqui, a gente completa esse círculo com as principais coisas que a gente tinha que trazer para vocês do GitHub Universe. E aí a gente chega agora no final do show. Eu vou estar postando ali no Twitch, a gente vai ter uma sala de bate-papo para quem quiser ficar depois para conversar com a gente, beleza?
Vimos muitos destaques hoje. Agora imaginem só quantas coisas que tivemos que cortar e que não conseguimos colocar neste espaço de hora e meia. Aprendemos sobre novas funcionalidades e como é que elas chegam para os clientes Enterprise. Ouvimos falar muito sobre segurança e um pouco sobre os próprios processos do GitHub. Finalmente, ouvimos algumas das nossas organizações favoritas sobre como elas usam o GitHub. Espero que vocês tenham divertido assistido, tanto quanto nós nos divertimos apresentando.
Só para lembrar também para todo mundo que todos os vídeos que a gente mostrou, esses clipes, eles estão disponíveis sob demanda na página do GitHub Universe. E também esse vídeo dessa apresentação vai ficar disponível para todo mundo depois, beleza? Compartilhe com a rede de vocês no futuro.
Não se esqueçam que isto está disponível em vídeo on demand em githubuniverse.com. Se tiverem dúvidas ou algumas reações que queiram fazer nas redes sociais, falem connosco no Twitter, no @GitHub. E por último, mas não mais importante, fiquem atentos para as novidades do Universo 2021, ao qual já estamos a preparar para que ainda seja melhor do que o que foi este ano. Oficialmente isto é para nós, assim me despido. E terminamos por hoje, Pedro.
Obrigado a todo mundo aí por ter participado e entra lá no bate-papo então, gente. Um abraço.
Valeu, pessoal. Até mais.
Valeu, pessoal. Até mais. Tchau.